My brother told me to know my place. Then I let him know who actually owned his company. I walked into the massive glass office that had been my father's, but now belonged entirely to my older brother Liam. The whole room smelled like his expensive cologne and his towering ego. I had an MBA, and I'd worked for years right beside Dad, handling the logistics that kept Ellis Engineering running smoothly. But now, it was like none of that mattered. Liam was sitting behind the enormous mahogany desk, leaning back with a smug, arrogant smirk that made my stomach churn. "You should be grateful I let you work here at all, Tara," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Not everyone belongs in the boardroom, especially not family who might distract the real leaders." He slid a thin folder across the polished surface of the desk. My heart was already pounding with a terrible premonition, but when I saw the label, Janitorial Budget, the blood drained from my face. I stared at the numbers, the cleaning schedules, the chemical inventory. "You wanted a role," he said, his voice dripping with false patience. "Well, this is your place, little sister. Now run along and go make sure the floors are spotless." The humiliation was immediate and public. A few weeks later, at the annual Ellis Engineering Gala, I was standing awkwardly by the bar, dressed in a borrowed dress that felt wrong for a janitorial budget manager. Liam, of course, was on stage, glowing under the spotlights, giving a rambling, self-congratulatory speech. He paused, spotting me in the crowd. "And a special thanks to family," he boomed, raising his champagne glass. "Tara here runs our cleaning department. True family business, right? Keeping our legacy literally spotless." The entire crowd of executives, investors, and employees erupted in laughter. It was a loud, cruel sound that echoed the emptiness inside me. My cheeks were on fire, and my hands were shaking as I forced a tight, fake smile onto my face. I clinked my barely touched wine glass against my own teeth, a small, silent, barely audible ping that was a promise to myself. I stared directly at his arrogant, laughing face across the room, my smile never faltering, and whispered into the night, "You'll regret that one day, Liam. I promise you, you will regret this. If you can't get enough of this family betrayal, hit subscribe for more true revenge stories." My father, the original owner of Ellis Engineering, was a quiet man who built this company on the principles of hard work and honest engineering. I still remembered the smell of blueprint paper and strong coffee in his old office. I'd been his shadow since high school, helping with logistics, vendor management, and even tax prep. While I was crunching numbers, Liam was out chasing the city's nightlife, convinced that just having the Ellis name was enough to guarantee success. When Dad died, suddenly from a massive heart attack 2 years ago, the will seemed clear. Everything, the entire company, went to Liam as the eldest son. But there was always a knot in my stomach. Dad knew how responsible I was, and how reckless Liam could be. Why would he risk his life's work? A few months before he died, I remembered him talking about a protective measure he was putting in place. I always suspected that Liam, with his sharp, predatory eyes, had found a way to tamper with or completely bury Dad's true final instructions. Liam might have inherited control, but I felt in my gut that he had hidden something absolutely vital from me and from the board. Liam's campaign of corporate cruelty intensified over the next few months, like he was trying to grind me into dust. He cut my pay to a bare minimum, claiming it was a budget reduction. Then he took the small office I used for managing the cleaning crew, forcing me to use a cramped, dusty corner near the storage room, and called me temporary staff to new hires. I felt the isolation and the shame closing in. I went to my mother, hoping for some moral support or outrage, but she just looked at me with that tired, resigned expression she always wore when it came to Liam. "Keep the peace, honey," she whispered, twisting the engagement ring my father had given her. "He's all we have left. We can't afford to be kicked out entirely." But her words only hardened my resolve. Liam had already taken the company, my role, and now he was trying to steal my dignity. "No," I told her, my voice quiet but firm. "He took everything we had, Mom. But he won't take my self-respect. Not one more inch." My chance came during a mandated company-wide archive cleanup. Liam was obsessed with image, so he'd hired a cheap service to digitize and destroy all the old paper files. I was stuck in the cavernous, forgotten basement archives, surrounded by decades of Ellis Engineering history, including my father's old desk and filing cabinets, which Liam had tossed down here. My hands were covered in dust and grime as I sorted through moldy documents. Then, buried under a stack of 1990s payroll records, I found it. It was a dusty, heavy-duty flash drive, the kind Dad always used for his most important documents. It was labeled in his familiar, neat script, Dad's final plan. My heart instantly hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I glanced nervously at the flickering fluorescent lights and the security camera mounted in the corner. I quickly swept the drive into the palm of my hand and slid it deep inside the inner zipper pocket of my purse, securing the zipper shut. It felt like holding a live grenade. Whatever was on this tiny device, I knew it was the key to unlocking the truth and possibly my way out. I couldn't wait until I got home. I drove straight to a coffee shop miles away from the office, ordered a weak latte, and locked myself into a quiet booth. My hands were trembling as I connected the flash drive to my personal laptop. It was protected by an old, familiar password, my mother's birthday. The folder opened instantly. Inside, there wasn't a revised will, but something much more damning and precise. A series of corporate share transfer documents. My father had secretly drafted a complete transfer of majority ownership to me, Tara Ellis, effective immediately upon his death. It wasn't a will, it was a corporate bylaw change and share reallocation. It was the ultimate protective plan. But the key form, the final, filed certificate, was missing. The document had been signed, dated, and notarized 6 months before his death, making it legally binding. But it had never been officially filed with the state registry or the corporate counsel's office. Or maybe, I thought, maybe it was filed, and Liam, with his oily charm and legal connections, had intentionally buried it. The cold reality of my brother's calculated malice washed over me. The next step was risky. I needed verification. I needed to know what had really happened after Dad's funeral. I made an appointment with Mr. Caldwell, my father's quiet, old-school corporate attorney, the only man Dad truly trusted with the company's secrets. We met in a sterile, silent room in his firm's older building. When I showed him a copy of the unsigned share transfer form from the flash drive and asked about the missing official paperwork, he looked profoundly uneasy. His hands, folded on the desk, twitched nervously. He cleared his throat. "I advised your father against this type of structure, Tara," he murmured, avoiding my eyes. But he insisted on having a final plan in place to protect the company. I leaned forward. "Did Liam ever see these documents?" I asked directly. Caldwell hesitated for a moment too long. "Liam visited me right after your father's funeral," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "He asked for all of your father's personal and legal files. I gave them to him." My stomach dropped, the bottom falling out of my world. Liam hadn't just benefited from the will, he had actively stolen my legacy. I felt a surge of white-hot rage that I hadn't felt since I was a child. I drove straight back to the office, ignoring the time and the fact that I was still officially a janitorial manager. I stormed past Sarah, the receptionist, and burst into Liam's glass office without knocking. He looked up from his tablet, annoyance quickly twisting into alarm when he saw the fire in my eyes. "What in the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. I didn't yell. I slapped a printed copy of the majority ownership transfer document onto his desk. "You tampered with Dad's will, or this corporate document, or both," I accused, my voice low and shaking with controlled fury. "You stole the company from me." The will was a smokescreen. He scanned the document quickly, his face regaining its composure, hardening into that familiar smirk of corporate invincibility. "Prove it," he sneered, tossing the paper back at me like trash. "The company is mine, Tara. Your little janitorial budget will remain the same. Now get out." I slapped the desk with the flat of my hand, the loud crack echoing in the silent office. "I will," I promised him, my voice a blade of cold steel. "I will prove it. And when I do, you'll be the one out on the street." The next morning, I arrived at the office with a new strategy. I would no longer fight him directly. Direct fights only fed his ego and made him more careful. I would become the quiet observer, the invisible fixture he completely dismissed. I played the role of the defeated, humiliated sister perfectly. I was overly polite, keeping my head down, and even apologetic about my emotional outburst the day before. "I'm sorry, Liam," I murmured in the break room. "The stress of the job just got to me." He looked at me with contemptuous pity. "See, Tara, boardrooms aren't for you. You're too fragile." I let him believe it. I would now play dumb, continue to polish the metaphorical floors, and observe every move he made, every file he printed, and every weakness he unknowingly exposed. My revenge wouldn't be loud or emotional. It would be precise, corporate, and legally devastating. I was no longer cleaning the building. I was cleaning out the corruption inside it. The first real strike came not from me, but from inside his own camp. I was sorting through mail in the storage room when an anonymous employee slipped a folded piece of paper into the pocket of my uniform jacket as they passed. I waited until I was alone, hands shaking, before unfolding the note. It was a single, cryptic sentence printed in tiny, block letters. "Check the offshore accounts. He's hiding millions through the Cyprus Holding Trust." The knot in my stomach tightened, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was pure, focused energy. My brother hadn't just stolen my legacy. He was actively destroying our father's company by embezzling funds. This was no longer just about family betrayal. This was corporate fraud. I finally knew where to strike, and how to hit him where it would hurt the most: his illegal money. I took out my phone and quickly snapped a photo of the note, then burned the paper in a small, metal trash bin, watching the edges curl and turn to ash, a symbol of the old life I was incinerating to make way for the new. Armed with the anonymous tip about the Cyprus Holding Trust, I started my investigation. My nights turned into a blur of green and white spreadsheets and complex corporate documents. I used my old university access to dig into international financial databases, tracing wire transfers and corporate registrations. Each clue was like a stone in a hidden trail, and each stone pointed directly back to Liam. The embezzlement wasn't a small side hustle, it was systematic. He was masking profits from major Ellis engineering contracts and funneling them into these offshore accounts. The trail was messy, full of confusing legal jargon and shell corporations, but my old logistics training kicked in. I started building a ledger, cross-referencing company invoices with the corresponding bank withdrawals. The pattern was clear. Every time Ellis Engineering landed a contract over $1 million, a corresponding wire transfer, always rounded to an odd, specific number, left the country and vanished into the trust. I was no longer a janitor. I was a forensic accountant, silently building the case that would destroy him. Liam, completely oblivious to the sword hanging over his head, continued to treat me like dirt. He demoted me again, this time to full-time warehouse duties, inventory, forklift driving, and organizing stock. "Maybe this'll teach you your place," he sneered, handing me a heavy-duty work vest and a clipboard. "You can't steal money if you're too busy counting pipes." He thought he was punishing me, but the warehouse was a gift. It was out of sight, out of the boardroom, and gave me countless hours of physical work to clear my head while my mind ran corporate strategy. I took the clipboard from him, feeling the familiar burn in my cheeks, but I masked my true feelings. Instead of sneering back, I lifted the clipboard and gave him a slow, deliberate smile. "Oh, it's teaching me plenty, Liam," I said, my voice sweet and quiet. "Every single day, I'm learning something new about this company. You just wait and see." He laughed, completely missing the threat in my tone, and walked away. The clipboard wasn't just for inventory, it was a disguise. The offshore trail was too complex to navigate alone. I needed an expert, someone I could trust completely. I reached out to Noah Vance, an old college friend who was now a top-tier financial analyst in the city. We met at a quiet, anonymous bar, the only place I felt safe discussing the details. I showed him my meticulous ledger of suspicious transactions. Noah was initially skeptical, but as he scrolled through my data, his professional curiosity took over. "This is a clean, organized fraud, Tara," he said, shaking his head. "Liam's either very smart or has a damn good team." He agreed to help me trace the stolen funds and, more importantly, figure out the ownership structure of the Cyprus Holding Trust. We spent hours reviewing Ellis Engineering's public filings, looking for any loophole, any forgotten detail, any crack in Liam's corporate facade. It was Noah who eventually asked the critical question: If Liam only controls the day-to-day operations, who actually controls the shares of the parent company? Noah's deep dive into the parent company's legal structure was what truly shocked us both. The public records showed that 51% of the voting shares, the controlling interest, were not held by Liam Ellis directly, but by a completely anonymous entity, the Ellis Legacy Trust. When Noah finally managed to pull the original formation documents for the trust, he gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Tara," he whispered, pushing the screen toward me. "Half the parent company is registered under an anonymous trust, and it has your father's signature on the formation documents." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. "Meaning?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Noah looked directly at me. "Meaning the trust controls the company. It's the real power here. And you are the listed sole beneficiary. My father hadn't just put a protective measure in place. He had secured my future, giving me the ultimate power to control his legacy, just in case Liam proved to be the disaster he was. Don't let the corporate espionage stop. Like and subscribe for more chapters in this epic revenge. The sheer brilliance of my father's plan left me speechless. He had essentially given Liam the title to manage the store while giving me the key to the vault. But there was a catch. Noah explained that to officially activate the trust and transfer the voting shares, we needed one missing document: my father's original trust activation letter. This letter, signed and notarized by him, instructed the corporate counsel to immediately execute the trust upon his death. I knew instantly where it had gone. I called Mr. Caldwell again, forcing him to tell me the full truth. Caldwell, tired and clearly ashamed, confirmed my worst fear. "It was in the box of personal and legal files," he admitted. "Liam took it the day after the funeral, Tara. He knew exactly what he was looking for. He never even opened the will in front of me. The corporate thief had physically stolen the key to my kingdom. My quiet revenge would now have to become an active retrieval mission. The letter had to be in Liam's office, likely hidden in his private safe or a locked drawer. I shifted my strategy from investigation to infiltration. I started bringing Liam coffee every morning, just the way he liked it, black, scalding hot, and left on the corner of his desk. I would linger, laughing at his terrible jokes, complimenting his new suits, and acting like the grateful, slightly dim-witted little sister who had finally accepted her place. While he preened and talked about his golf game, I was discreetly cataloging the contents of his office. I found a hidden wall safe behind a large abstract painting, and a heavy, locked filing cabinet near his personal bar. One day, while he was distracted on a very loud phone call, I found it, a thick, sealed envelope labeled ominously, "For legal counsel only." It was hidden at the very back of a drawer under a pile of old tax returns. I didn't open it. I knew that was the prize. But I needed a way to get the contents without him ever knowing I'd been there. My role as the janitorial manager suddenly became my greatest asset. I told the regular cleaning crew that Liam's complex office printer needed a firmware update that only I, as the designated system support, could handle. Late one Tuesday night, when the building was completely empty, I snuck into his office, opened the printer, and with tools borrowed from the warehouse, I secretly installed a document scanner and transmitter inside the machine's casing. It was a crude but effective piece of spy gear. I connected it to a VPN and a secure, encrypted email address Noah had set up for me. The next morning, every file Liam printed, I received an immediate, perfect, unwatermarked copy in real time. The printer was now my intelligence operative, working tirelessly against its owner. It was a beautiful thing. The office printer delivered the goods quickly. One morning, the scanner sent a single, heavily redacted legal document, a minutes of meeting form from 3 years prior. It was a resolution to remove me from the company board due to lack of engagement. But the key detail was the signature line. My signature was a forgery, and not a good one. He had clearly faked board consent, removing me from any oversight years before Dad's death. This was the first piece of undeniable criminal evidence, not just corporate fraud. I immediately forwarded the file to Noah with a single word: "Gotcha." Noah called me 5 minutes later, his voice tight with excitement. "This is a Tara," he whispered, clearly energized. "The signature forgery is proof of unlawful corporate action and fraud. It invalidates every board decision made since. You have him cornered. Now let's make it public and end this. It was time to make Liam sweat. He was too arrogant to be caught by a direct threat, so I needed him to panic and expose himself further. I used a burner phone and a disposable email account to send Liam one short, anonymous message. You're being audited. They're looking at Cyprus. The immediate effect was spectacular. The office tension was palpable the next day. Liam's booming voice was replaced by frantic, whispered phone calls. My hidden scanner went into overdrive, sending me dozens of documents as he started transferring funds, trying to cover his tracks. He was moving millions of dollars between the Cyprus Holding Trust and various fake, internal accounts, trying to make the books look clean. He was digging his own grave with every single click, exactly as I had predicted he would. The desperation had made him sloppy, frantic, and reckless. I captured every panic transaction, every desperate email to his personal and clearly illegal offshore accountant. The chain of evidence was now complete. The original, unfiled trust document, the signature forgery that removed me from the board, and now the live, documented evidence of his embezzlement and cover-up. Noah was ecstatic when I sent him the final data dump. He's doing our job for us. Noah grinned over a secured video call. He's officially destroyed all plausible deniability. We now have a clean, traceable line from Ellis Engineering's coffers directly to Liam Ellis's pockets in Cyprus. He's digging his own grave, Noah concluded, his eyes shining. And you, Tara, are holding the shovel. It's time to choose the burial day. The trap was not only set, it was completely sealed shut. The time for quiet observation was over. I met with Mr. Caldwell again, this time with a high-powered legal team Noah had recommended. We were no longer asking questions. We were preparing a lawsuit, a criminal complaint, and a corporate takeover. I laid out all the evidence, the hidden trust documents, the forged board resolution, and the months of documented frantic embezzlement. Caldwell, a man who believed in the letter of the law, was pale with shock and professional outrage. He agreed to cooperate fully, admitting his initial mistake in handing the files over to Liam. The legal team prepared a multi-pronged attack, one motion to legally reopen the Ellis Legacy Trust based on the fraudulent concealment of the activation letter, and a simultaneous motion to have Liam temporarily removed as CEO due to documented financial misconduct and forgery. The sheer weight of the truth was finally about to crush him. Liam, in his final act of corporate arrogance, called an emergency board meeting. The official reason was to discuss unexpected budget discrepancies, but I knew he was trying to clean up his mess and rally the remaining board members who were loyal to him. I sent a formal email to his secretary requesting to attend the meeting as a staff representative on corporate well-being. He replied with a brief, dismissive email, clearly amused. You're just cleaning staff, Tara. Stay out of the boardroom, where the real decisions are made. His confidence was a beautiful thing to watch crumble. I sent back a one-word reply to his email, my hands shaking only slightly as I typed. Not for long. I knew that when I walked into that boardroom the next morning, I wouldn't be leaving it. I sat at the very end of the massive mahogany conference table, in the seat reserved for a recording secretary, a spot Liam had forced me into to keep me quiet. Liam was presenting a convoluted explanation of the budget, sweating under the glare of the track lighting. Mid-sentence, the heavy oak doors opened and two men in dark, professional suits walked in, carrying briefcases. They were followed by a stern-faced woman holding a clipboard. Liam froze. "I am sorry to interrupt," the woman announced, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. "We are here from the State Financial Oversight Commission. We received an anonymous tip regarding Ellis Engineering's transactions. We must begin our audit immediately." Liam stammered, his face turning a sickly, pasty white. The board members exchanged worried glances, and the auditors began reviewing transactions right there, in front of everyone, pulling up the same documents I had sent them anonymously. The boardroom was tense. The auditors worked quickly, and it wasn't long before the official figures came out. The senior auditor cleared her throat and looked directly at the board. "It is our professional assessment that funds totaling over $7 million were systematically siphoned from Ellis Engineering's primary accounts into offshore holdings under Mr. Liam Ellis's direct control," she stated calmly. "We have clear evidence of embezzlement." The board members gasped, and several started whispering frantically. Liam was on his feet, stammering denials, his polished facade completely shattered. "It's a mistake. Mismanagement. Not theft," he yelled. I sat quietly, my hands folded on the table, my eyes calm and locked onto my brother's frantic, desperate face. I waited. This was his moment of maximum pain, but it wasn't my time to talk yet. The heavy door of the boardroom opened again, and Mr. Caldwell, my father's old corporate attorney, walked in. He was holding a large, yellowed envelope, sealed with my father's official stamp. He placed it carefully on the table. "I apologize for the delay, gentleman and lady," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "But this document, fraudulently concealed from the board and Miss Tara Ellis for 2 years, must now be admitted as evidence." Liam lunged for the envelope, his desperation winning over his legal training. "That's private." Caldwell's bodyguard, a hulking, quiet man I hadn't even noticed, gently blocked him. Caldwell opened the envelope, retrieved the single sheet of paper, and read it aloud. "Upon my death, I instruct my legal counsel to immediately transfer all voting shares of Ellis Engineering to my daughter, Tara Ellis, effective immediately, allowing her to assume control and stewardship of my legacy." Liam's face went from white to a ghastly, blotchy red. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back with a soft, confident scrape that seemed to fill the room. My voice was no longer that of a frightened sister or a janitorial worker. It was the voice of the owner. I looked down the long table at my brother, whose eyes held a mixture of panic, disbelief, and hatred. "You told me to know my place, Liam," I stated, my voice completely steady. "You humiliated me. You cut my pay. You forced me to clean your bathroom. Well, I found my place." I walked slowly up to the head of the table, past the silent, stunned board members, and stood exactly where Liam had always stood. I placed both hands flat on the polished mahogany. "Turns out," I said, looking him dead in the eyes, "my place is at the head of this table, and your place is nowhere near it." The board members, sensing the shift in power, began to clap lightly, tentatively at first, then growing into a stunned, nervous applause for their new leader. The corporate takeover was executed with the same cold, ruthless efficiency that Liam had used to steal the company. I immediately filed the official documents that had been waiting for months, activating the Ellis Legacy Trust. Within hours, the legal ownership of Ellis Engineering officially shifted to me. The board, terrified of being implicated in Liam's fraud, immediately voted to support the new corporate structure and my ascension as CEO. The moment was not dramatic, but legally final. A few minutes later, 2 silent, professional security guards entered the boardroom. I slid a termination order across the table to Liam, my own signature crisp and black at the bottom. "You are relieved of all duties, effective immediately," I informed him. "The company car and all assets must be returned. Security will escort you out." He screamed, he pleaded, he tried to argue, but the security guards calmly and firmly ushered him out of the boardroom and off the floor, past his former secretary and the employees he had mocked. His own sister had signed the document that ended his career. The media explosion was exactly what Noah and I had planned. The news hit the local papers and financial news channels within the hour. Sister exposes corrupt CEO, becomes new head of Ellis Engineering. The story of the janitor who was secretly the rightful owner, the corporate fraud, and the emotional betrayal went viral instantly. Public sympathy flooded in. Employees, tired of Liam's cruel and arrogant management, started cheering. I got dozens of calls, texts and emails from former employees, vendors, and even rivals, all congratulating me. The day that started with me sitting as a mere secretary ended with me giving a press conference as the new CEO. I realized then that my father had not just protected me from Liam, he had given me the perfect, morally justifiable weapon to defeat him publicly. The authorities detained Liam just as he was attempting to pack a massive suitcase full of his most expensive belongings from his corporate apartment. The charges were serious: corporate fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. The final, humiliating scene was caught on camera outside his building. He screamed at the officers. He shouted my name, his face contorted with shock and fury as the cameras flashed. He was screaming that he would appeal, that I was crazy, that this was all a terrible mistake. I watched the video feed from my new old office, my father's office, now rightfully mine. I didn't feel joy or excitement. I felt a silent, deep satisfaction. Justice, not the messy, emotional kind, but the precise, legal kind, was finally real. The man who told me to know my place was finally finding his. That night, I sat alone in my father's old, comfortable chair behind the mahogany desk. I didn't turn on the office lights, preferring the quiet darkness and the glow of the city lights outside. I closed my eyes and let the silence wash over me. I wasn't crying. I was finally at peace. I reached out and touched the smooth wood of the desk, the same desk where my father had signed that final document, securing my future. I whispered into the silence of the massive office, a quiet, final thought to the man who had prepared for everything. "You were right, Dad," I murmured. Family doesn't automatically mean loyalty. It means a shared legacy. And I will protect that legacy. The rebuilding process was the most fulfilling work of my life. I wasn't just fixing books. I was restoring the company's soul. My first major action was a full-scale corporate reform. I immediately raised the pay of every employee, starting with the warehouse and janitorial staff, the people Liam had treated the worst. I canceled Liam's extravagant corporate jet lease and invested the savings into clean energy initiatives, a dream my father had always held but never executed. I fulfilled my father's original vision, shifting Ellis Engineering from a corrupt, ego-driven machine into a forward-thinking, ethical company. I was proud to be the steward of this place. The staff's respect was earned, not demanded. One morning, I walked into the main lobby to find a massive, beautiful bouquet of flowers on the reception desk, addressed simply to Tara, CEO. Hundreds of employees had chipped in. One of the longtime warehouse managers, a gruff man named Mike who had seen me at my lowest, came up to me with tears in his eyes. "Liam made me feel like an idiot for 20 years, he said, holding a coffee cup tight in his hands. "You changed the whole place in a month. You're not just the boss, Miss Ellis. You're the heart of this place, just like your dad." His words meant more than any multi-million-dollar contract. I finally felt like I was leading a family, not just a company. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at the office. It was postmarked from a minimum security correctional facility. It was from Liam. The handwriting was messy and hurried, not his usual polished script. The letter was a rambling mix of self-pity and entitlement. "I'm sorry," he wrote, the words looking hollow on the page. "I didn't think you'd actually win. Please talk to Mom and get me a good lawyer." I folded the letter silently, the paper feeling thin and unimportant in my hands. I didn't show it to anyone. I walked over to the old filing cabinet, the one he had always kept locked, and filed the letter away neatly in a manila folder I labeled Lessons Learned. His apology, or lack thereof, didn't matter. The price had been paid. I hosted my first major investor gala as the new CEO. It was held in the same room where Liam had humiliated me, but the laughter this time was genuine and warm. A reporter from Forbes cornered me by the dessert table. "Miss Ellis," he said, clicking his pen. "Your story is incredible. What's your leadership philosophy after such an experience?" I smiled, thinking back to the quiet nights I spent tracing wire transfers and installing scanners. "You don't have to shout to prove your strength," I said, looking out at the room full of successful, powerful people. "You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. Just keep your eyes open, and always keep the receipts." I dedicated an entire memorial wing of the corporate headquarters in honor of my father. It was a beautiful, quiet space filled with his old blueprints, his trophies, and his favorite books. At the dedication ceremony, I unveiled a simple bronze plaque that I had commissioned. The inscription was short, but it captured everything he had taught me, everything I had fought for. The plaque read, "For Ellis, my father, for teaching me my worth, even when others, including my own family, couldn't see it." It was a silent testament to his wisdom and his protective love. I began mentoring young women in business schools across the state, sharing my story, not as a victim, but as a strategic survivor. I taught them that power isn't about the title on the door, but the control you have over the narrative and the facts. "I want you to be the quiet one," I told a packed lecture hall one afternoon. "The one they underestimate. Let them think you're just there to take notes or clean up. But always have the most information. You don't have to shout to prove your strength. Just keep receipts. My mother finally visited the office one afternoon. She was emotional, overwhelmed by the change and the reality of my success and Liam's downfall. We sat in my office, and she looked out over the skyline, tears welling up in her eyes. "Your father," she whispered. "He always knew you would lead this company. He just couldn't risk leaving it to you directly while Liam was being Liam." I walked over to her and put my arm around her shoulder. I had fought this battle alone, but I accepted her quiet peace. "So did I, Mom." I smiled softly. "So did I." I made one last major change to the company, a symbolic rebrand. I called a press conference and announced the official new name, Ellis Legacy Group. It was a nod to my father's original vision, emphasizing the unity of the staff and the ethics we all now shared, rather than the singular, toxic ego that had nearly destroyed us. The new logo was unveiled, a strong, intertwined knot representing the unbreakable bond of a well-built structure. It was a clear statement to the entire industry that the era of arrogance and theft was over. I returned to the same boardroom where Liam had mocked me, sitting at the head of the long table for a casual meeting with my trusted executive team. I was wearing a simple, tailored suit. After the meeting wrapped, I dismissed everyone and stayed behind for a moment. I went to the spot where Liam had slammed the janitorial budget folder onto the table. I placed a single, perfect white rose on the polished wood. It wasn't a tribute to Liam. It was a moment of solemn, private reflection for every woman, in every office, who had ever been told to know her place by an arrogant man. I picked up a pen and started signing a new round of contracts, multi-million-dollar deals that secured Ellis Legacy Group's future for years to come. I heard the faint, distant sounds of a city outside my window, a city I was now helping to build. I thought of Liam, serving time, his expensive suits replaced by prison jumpsuits. I thought of myself, years ago, sweeping the floors, quietly plotting. My brother told me to know my place. Now he answers from his, and mine. It's wherever I decide to sit. Thank you for following my story to its final, satisfying conclusion. If my journey inspired you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your in the comments.